I think you talked about not just helping those that get diagnosed. How can someone show up as a leader, or how can someone be supportive of that? Like, what do you say?
I had people who told me we did not know what to say. So, of course, they chose nothing. Well, to me, that meant they didn't love me. Now, if you have employees and you're going through cancer treatment, how can you lead through a cancer diagnosis? It did get easier to take life more lighthearted as I got older. And maybe that is that wisdom thing where you realize, first of all, we all are going to die.
Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Leader Podcast. So excited to bring you this conversation with Deb Krier. She's going to share her insights today on leadership, resilience, and the importance of humor in the face of adversity. And so she draws from experiences in her personal journey with multiple cancer diagnoses, and she really emphasized the significance of acknowledging the emotions you're feeling, supporting others, and shifting from merely surviving to truly living. She really highlights the importance of laughter and the need for specific support in difficult times, and really the mindset to thrive. Matt and I are really excited to bring this interview to you today.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Leader Podcast. Matt and I are super excited today to be joined with Deb Krier, and she is a lot of fun. She lights up a room, and she's got a great sense of humor. I'm excited to talk to her about leadership, what she's learned along the way, and kind of talk about resilience a little bit too as well. She's had an amazing career and some amazing things to share with us. So Deb, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I truly am honored to be on your podcast. We're going to have a great discussion.
Yeah. So we love to because the word leadership is so used and thrown out there by so many organizations, we love to just start by defining that and ask you, Deb, what does the word leadership mean to you? How would you define it?
Well, I think one of the things is that we think we are born leaders or that we can learn to be a leader. I mean, it's kind of a weird combination. I think there are people that are just natural leaders, right? They're in preschool and they're in charge, and things like that. I think one of the problems comes with people who think they are leaders because they have a title. I'm the president, I'm the founder, I'm the whatever of the company. And then they think, I'm a leader because of that. And that's not always the case.
Yeah, totally. Deb, my experience of you in just a few minutes that I've known you is that you're very just free, and that's the best way I can describe you. Tell us a little bit about that. Because I do believe that the most effective leaders I've ever met were also the most free, or the most just unattached to stuff and people's opinions. And you strike me as that kind of person. What can you tell us about how you got there?
It definitely has not always been an easy journey. I'm probably old enough to be both of your mother. But it is, and maybe that's the thing is it takes a while to get there, right? I mentioned that we're not really a born leader, or we learn it, or, I mean, clearly you become a leader, but I think a big part of it is we learn through experience. And one of the things that I have learned, especially in the last 10 years, is that we got to take life a lot more not serious, right? Laugh at ourselves. Pretty much any decision we make is not going to be the end of the world. And so why get so caught up and stressed over it? But it's about how can we help others? And I think that really is the biggest part of being a leader. And I'm not always sure I call myself a leader, right? That's kind of like you're calling yourself an expert in something. But it is, for me, it is about how can we help others?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, and I love that you said that too, Deb. I think for me and Matt and Tate, who's not our other co-host, who's not with us today, I think that's kind of why we've liked the name, the Everyday Leader. Just the idea that you you can be an everyday person and still be a leader. You don't have to have that, as you spoke to,
Hmm.
that title
Hmm.
to necessarily be one.
Right.
Um,
And it's funny because when we see sometimes who leaders are, they're not the people in charge. And they're, like in a business setting, maybe it's, a team member. It's, I always loved the admin assistants and people like that. A lot of times they're the true leaders that are keeping things going. But yeah, you're never quite sure sometimes. And obviously we can have multiple leaders. Then the challenge is, how do we work together?
well, Deb, for our listener who may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your story. What does someone want to know about Deb?
Well, somebody doesn't know me? Gasp. The long story, I am a Colorado native. I was born in the mountains of Colorado. My graduating class had a whopping 32.
Ooh,
I know, isn't that fun? And we
it was a
won't
big
say
class.
how.
I had 28, Deb.
Oh, hey, I love it. I love it. We just won't say how long ago that was. And but I was in corporate America. I worked for large nonprofits. I actually worked for the American Cancer Society, which ties in later to my story. Um, and I worked for agencies, things like that. But a little over 20 years ago, I started my own company, Wise Women Communications, and it's a full service marketing agency. But then, as often happens in life, I got thrown a curveball, right? I went for my annual physical and, long story short, discovered that I had breast cancer. And it definitely changed everything for my life, which I think a cancer diagnosis does. It really makes you rethink your priorities and things. I unfortunately had multiple difficulties and challenges. Came close to dying 3 times, and one was within a couple hours. I mean, like, I heard the doctors arguing over how fast I was going to die that day, and I was like, I can hear you." Um, you know,
You're like, "Do I
and
get a say in this?"
and that was kind of the thing. It was like, I get a vote, and but, it really does make you rethink what is important and what isn't. And so then I decided to really, and now I'll be honest, I didn't wanna be cancer girl. My business coach is who pushed me to, as she put it, use what I learned to help others. And so that was when I really started doing things where I help others who are on their cancer journey or know someone who is on a cancer journey.
Yeah, and also, Deb, it wasn't just one diagnosis either, right?
Right. 3 times. And the first one, as I said, was breast cancer, and it is my full technical diagnosis is stage 4 triple positive metastatic breast cancer. And stage 4 is not considered curable. Now, it's been 10 years and it has not cropped back up. So that's actually a really good thing. They said get to 5 years, get to 10 years. It's still there. Who knows, what's gonna happen? And then I was diagnosed with basal cell carcinoma. That sounds horrible, right? Skin cancer. This little freckly redheaded kid that grew up in Colorado did not know what sunscreen was. And so I, had a little spot taken off. And it is something that obviously I now have to monitor all the time. And then a couple years ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and it is a new cancer. So I've had 3 totally different cancers.
Wow.
So no, I know, Deb, you like to find humor in the journey in the cancer
Mhm,
diagnosis.
mhm.
Like, how do you do that with something so serious? How do you do that with something that can be so bleak and so
Mhm.
scary? And yeah, could you
Well,
talk a little bit about that?
yeah, there are times where I'm not a happy camper. And I've had over 30 surgeries. My body will never be the same, obviously. One of the things that happened, and the reason why I almost died the first time was I went into septic shock. And about 75% of people who are in septic shock, now you can get sepsis, which is obviously very serious, but septic shock is then the next step in that. And it did a number on me. It did my kidneys in, and we're still, working on those and other things. I mean, septic shock is when your body just shuts down. The internal organs are shut down. And and so, yeah, I mean, there are times where I'm mad. I'm just really annoyed that this happened, but, I still remember one of the old MASH episodes, right? I watched them when they were original, y'all watch them when they're on reruns. Um, and they asked the Hawkeye character why they were always laughing, and he said, "Because if I didn't laugh, I would cry." And I think that is part of it. But, I also have so much fun making my caregivers laugh because they all have really, really, really serious jobs. So can I make them laugh or at least crack a smile? And now I'll be honest, some of them don't understand me, and those are the ones that I haven't gone back to. You either get that I'm going to be a wild and wacky patient, or I go elsewhere. But it to me, and the other thing is we also know from various true, real medical studies from places like Mayo Clinic and those things that laughter does help us heal. Both from obviously a mental health aspect, but it raises certain chemicals in your body. It can lower your blood pressure, all sorts of things. And so laughter, it's like they say, laughter truly is the best medicine.
Deb, I love that. And I can think of the times when I laugh with my kids or I laugh with my wife, and the moment after when you're kind of catching your breath, like, I mean, that's probably the best
Mhm.
feel. It's one of the best feelings in the
Right.
world. And I don't do it as often as I want, or I don't think of it or intentionally create that as often as I want. And it sounds like maybe you always didn't either. What can you tell us about that? Like, has it
Yeah.
become just like an intention? Is it now just almost not intentional because it's just kind of the way you roll, or what does that look like?
Well, there are times where people look at me and they say, "We really do need you to be serious." And obviously there are times where you have to be, right? But I was a fairly serious kid growing up. I am an only child, and it was one of those things where you were supposed to be serious, and don't talk in class. That was one of my problems. Um, and all sorts of things like that. But I think, it did get easier to take life more lighthearted as I got older. And maybe that is that wisdom thing where you realize, ugh, first of all, we all are going to die. Nobody gets off the hook. My expiration date may or may not have changed. Who knows? But life is very serious. And let's be, like right now, as we're recording this, boy, there's a lot going on in the world, and very, very serious and very scary. So it's not that I don't acknowledge that and know what's going on, but I also then kind of push it away and think, okay, I remember on September 11th, the job I had was I was the management man. I was the head of the crisis management team for a very, very large international company. And we were told that we were potentially a target because of what we did. And, we dealt with what we needed to do with our employees, all of those various things. And then I went home and watched I Love Lucy. Because you just kind of needed that release, right? Exactly like you said, something happens and you have that release. And I tell people, if you got to watch I Love Lucy or, whatever it is, give yourself a little bit of a chance to giggle a bit.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think that's an intention, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's one of the things I'm already taking away from our conversation. Like, I'm committed to going home and creating more intentional moments where we can laugh.
Right.
Yeah.
And when something serious happens, obviously you have to think about it. Does this need to stay serious?
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, right? But there are other times where it's like, how can we lighten this up? I mentioned my skin cancer. I tell my doctor, I'm here for my strip and spin. And he's like, "Don't say that." And I said, "But that's what it is." And, he's now learned I'm just gonna say that. But it when possible, when appropriate is maybe the best way to put it, it's okay to lighten things up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thought that's coming to mind, I don't know if we talked about this one when I was on your podcast, Deb, but as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, our prophet and president of our church passed away this week. And one of
Yes.
my favorite quotes he had was, the joy we experience in our life has everything to do with the focus of our life and not the circumstances. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And I kind of hear you like finding joy, finding happiness, regardless of the circumstances. And what would your advice be to someone who's just got that cancer diagnosis, or just maybe has what in their mind is the most terrible thing that could happen to them? Like, what would your advice be to them, and how would you tell them they can maybe find some laughter or some joy or something positive in all that?
Right. Well, again, he was what, 100 and something when he
101.
passed? Yeah. I mean, what an amazing and incredible life. But I tell people when they're first diagnosed, acknowledge that you are now scared witless, right? You know, and acknowledge that and give yourself the grace to feel that. I think we immediately think, I must be brave. No, it's okay to cry, to yell, to scream, to do whatever, because that's natural. You know, and when we don't feel that, it's kind of there, and we need to feel it. You know, so it's okay to feel that, and then think, okay, what's next? You know, and one of the things that I really tell people is you have to advocate for yourself. Whatever you want to do is what you should do. You know, I mentioned that I worked for the American Cancer Society. I also worked for an oncologist. So I knew just enough to be dangerous when I was diagnosed, right? I recognized what those words were. And you know, it's okay to feel that anger, you know, and those things, but then start figuring out what you want to do. Now, Dr. Google is not necessarily your friend. You know, I don't know. You know, you type cancer into any browser, and it about blows up, right? Because there's so many things, and I will tell people, you know, I use AI all the time. Not for this. You know, don't go into your AI and say, what treatment should I choose? Because of course it pulls from good and bad and all those things. But get educated, ask questions. You know, it is perfectly okay. Your doctor and your medical team work for you. Ask them questions and don't hesitate to ask those questions, even if you think it's a stupid question. More importantly, if it's a scary question, make sure you ask it. You know, and I also, one of the things I tell people is, at least initially, don't go through this alone. You know, if you can, take somebody with you to those first appointments, because the second somebody told you you have cancer, your brain goes, "Look." You know, and so write your questions down and make sure that you have somebody there with you, whether it's a spouse, a partner, you know, might be your kid, you know, whatever it is, might be a friend. Have them have those questions so that then they can make sure that you get your answers. You know, my oncologist has a sign on every door, and it says, "Do not leave this office if your questions have not been answered."
That's great. That could apply to so many situations,
Mhm,
right? Yeah.
right. You take your car into the mechanic. What the heck are you doing to it?
Deb, can you talk a little bit more? I love what you said about just acknowledging those emotions. And it seems like sometimes we want to resist. What have you experienced or seen in those you've worked with when they accept, so to
Mhm,
speak, like they accept the
mhm,
circumstances,
right.
or and just
Mhm,
acknowledge and maybe
mhm,
stop resisting?
mhm.
What have you noticed happens?
I think when we acknowledge, you know, what is happening, and maybe what, you know, I mean, it could be very, very serious, right? Then we can deal with it. You know, it's funny. I'm reading a book right now where one of the main characters is a death doula. Right? She goes and she is with people as they die. And it's a very interesting book. It wasn't at all what I was expecting. Um, and in it, she talks about the fact that once you accept whatever is going on, then you can really start saying, here's my plan. Here's the rights that I need to, you know, here's the wrongs that I need to right. Here are the steps I need to take. Acceptance is not giving up. And I think that's one of the really important things. But acceptance means, okay, this is going to happen. How am I going to plan for it? And what am I going to do?
Yeah. I That's so good. I think of, even in the business world, right? I think of Jim Collins and the Stockdale paradox, right? It's like acknowledging your brutal
Hmm.
facts
Right.
and
Right. Hmm.
not giving up hope.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Drew and I recently were at an experience with someone where they presented this to us as like getting accurate.
Hmm.
Another way I think of this is like
Ah.
not, to your point, not
Hmm.
accepting, like giving
Hmm.
up, or
Hmm.
letting other things act
Hmm.
upon you, and
Hmm.
just telling yourself the
Hmm.
truth, looking
Right.
at things
Hmm.
as they really are, getting accurate with your situation and acknowledging that. It sounds like that to you has been extremely helpful to then
Hmm.
move past that and like say,
Right.
now
Hmm. Right.
what am I going to do about
Hmm.
it? How am I going to respond?
Hmm. Right. Yeah. And of course, one of the tricky things then is, how are others around you going to respond?
Mhm.
Because they don't want you to be in pain. They don't want you to suffer. They don't want to accept that, this could be, a very serious diagnosis. And so it's important to not get drug into that. But I think it's also interesting, one of the things, and this happened multiple times with me, and we all kind of fall into that trap. Oh, I know so and so, or my grandma, whoever, they had that type of cancer, and they died. Right?
Yeah, they have
We
like their
don't
past
need that.
evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, or their treatment did this, or all of those things. The thing to remember is, whatever your diagnosis is, cancer, any serious disease, you are an individual. What happens as you take treatment, as you do, say, natural, as prayer, obviously, is something, that can make major changes. Each person is different. I know a young woman who has the exact same diagnosis as I do. That's where the similarities end. And
Mm.
and so if somebody says, "Oh, this happened to me," or "That happened to me," I always know that they're saying it, especially if they're telling me, "Hey, you need to do this." They mean well, and so I thank them. But then I process in my brain, is this something I really want to do? Like, one of the things, cancer in many people causes extreme nausea, right? And so one of the things people are always really big on saying is, drink ginger ale. Ginger ale makes me sick. I hate ginger ale, and so you kinda have to just, figure out what's gonna work for you.
Yeah.
Deb, a thought just came to mind, and I I think you talked about not just helping those that get diagnosed, but those who have the family member or the
Mhm,
friend.
mhm,
What how can someone show up as a leader, or how can
mhm,
someone be supportive of that? Like, what do you say? What
mhm.
what questions do
Right.
you
Mhm,
ask? Like,
mhm,
what do you not say,
mhm,
to
mhm, mhm.
point out
Right.
some of the things
Mhm,
you're talking
mhm,
about? What, like,
mhm,
if you have a friend that has this
mhm,
diagnosis, and I'm sure this could
mhm,
relate to a lot of other things in life, like, what's the advice
mhm,
you give
mhm.
that person, the spouse, the friend,
That
the
is one of the
parent?
questions I get asked the most. We don't know what to do. You need to watch the platitudes. I mean, like, I wouldn't say, we mentioned you guys are a lot younger than I am. You're young, you can fight this. Maybe, maybe not. But one of the things, and I had a lot of people that they didn't really ghost, but you could tell they didn't know what to say. And they,
Mm,
because
right,
they don't wanna make me feel worse. They, all those various things, and I'll be honest, there are times where I'm like, "I don't wanna talk about it." But I had people who told me, "We did not know what to say." So, of course, they
right,
chose nothing. Well, to me, that meant they didn't love me. Now, that certainly was not the case, but, and so when people tell me, "Hey, I don't know what to say," I tell them Hallmark has cards, right? And whether it's a serious card, and it could be things like, "I'm going to pray for you." I think that's spectacular. I love that. I think that is absolutely wonderful. But I also tell people, you need to be specific. Don't just say, "Hey, Matt, just tell me what you need," because your brain cannot grasp that, right?
Yeah.
You're going through all this other stuff. And so what you want to do is say, "I will bring you dinner." I will on Thursday, I mean, be real specific. Can I go to the grocery store for you? Ask very specific questions because then our, little befuddled brains can latch onto that. We had somebody when I was so sick. I was in the hospital when I had my big episode for 7 weeks. In and out of ICU, in and out of surgery, all sorts of stuff. And I remember somebody contacted us. We have beagles that we have, and we have cats too, but we have these dogs. And somebody actually contacted us and said, "Do any of them need to go to the vet for checkups?" Right?
Mm.
I mean,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
or something that I might say, to you would be, "Can I take your kids to a movie? Can I get them
Mm.
out?" Things like that. So be very specific. And if you're really not sure, what do I say? What do I do? Just say, "I'm sorry this is happening to you." Then that gives them the opportunity to go further with that conversation or simply say, "Thank you."
Yeah. I you're causing me to remember an experience because I've wrestled with this before when
Mhm,
people who I love and
mhm,
know experience
mhm,
tragedy or hard
mhm.
things. It's like
Right,
you
right.
don't want
Mhm,
to act like
mhm,
you can help them. You also don't
mhm.
want to ignore them, and
Right.
so
So you don't do anything.
yeah, exactly. I think that that's happened to me before, and I remember a couple years ago, a friend of mine, his son passed away in an
Mhm,
accident, and teenage son. And I remember texting him and saying, "I don't know what to say."
mhm, mhm. Right.
And it's like, I just had to say something to you, and I literally don't even know what to say. I'm not gonna try to say, like, "Hey, everything's
It'll
gonna be
all work
okay." Yeah,
out
like
or
right.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
that's just a great
mhm,
reminder, and I love the specificity, like,
mhm,
to ask. Like, maybe they
mhm,
say, "Actually, no, like, my
mhm.
dogs don't need to go to the vet,"
Right.
but, like, what a thoughtful
Mhm,
thing to ask,
mhm,
or,
mhm.
"Yeah,
Right.
actually, my kids
Mhm,
are with their grandma, so, like, they don't
mhm,
need
mhm,
anything right now, but thanks so much for
mhm.
asking." I
Right.
love that because
Mhm,
I also think it's easy to ask that
mhm,
question,
mhm.
and I joke about this a lot,
Right.
the, "If you need anything, let me know," or,
Mhm,
like, "Hey, is there anything I can do to help?" kind of
mhm,
question, and, yeah, most of the time, that doesn't really get,
mhm. Right.
um,
Mhm,
an effective
mhm.
answer,
Right.
so it's a
You know,
great reminder.
and people sent me gifts, and I just absolutely love all of them, and I still have all of them. Some were like little things, like little angel coins, right? And so those were in my pocket every time I went for treatment. People sent me little stuffed animals, which I thought were very cool, right? Because I had it with me in the hospital, and so then I knew that they were thinking about me. It's kind of like they were there. And I have 2 prayer shawls that people sent me that are in a place of honor because, I said we have all these dogs and cats and I don't want them near them. One of the coolest gifts I got, and this was from somebody who I didn't even think really knew I existed, right? I got a handmade teddy bear, and it's a good sized bear, right? And the note with it said, "My church choir prayed over this before we sent it."
Mm.
Now, I was in church choirs forever and ever, and they didn't know that, but that that just meant the world to me that they did that. And I mean, some people might not want to. I had some people who said, "Well, we don't pray." I'm like, "Okay, well then just think of me." And it was very interesting because anytime in the last 10 years that I go in for something serious, it's like there's a bubble around me, right? Of all of these people who are sending well wishes and prayers and things like that. And I remember one of the times I was in, and it was, a quasi serious surgery. They always tell you could die, but, because you can, but, um, and but I remember thinking, well, I can't die. All those people be mad at me. Um, but, it is okay just to let people know that you're thinking about 'em.
Yeah.
I love that, Deb. I had heard that advice from somewhere else recently, and it's like if you're one, I mean, just in general, if you're thinking
Mhm.
about someone, what a
Right.
great way to make their
Mhm,
day to send a text
mhm,
message that said, "Hey,
mhm,
just thinking
mhm,
about you today. Hope you're
mhm,
doing well."
mhm. Right.
And if they're going through
Mhm,
tragedy, and
mhm,
I think that's just another great thing
mhm,
you could say is,
mhm.
"Hey, I just want you to know we're thinking
Right,
about you."
right. I had somebody one time who, they lost a child, and people really had no idea what to say. It's exactly what you were saying, Matt. And what they told me was because people didn't acknowledge it, it was like they didn't exist.
Yeah, it was like they didn't care. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. No, I mean, tying this back to like the concept of leadership, I think that
Mhm.
like this is part of the choice of leadership. Like
Mhm.
leaders recognize,
Mhm.
leaders
Mhm.
take action.
Right.
Again, I
Sometimes
just
where we're
personally, like,
uncomfortable. Mhm.
yeah, like they go where it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable to go talk to someone about the tragedy they're
Mhm.
going through or to
Mhm.
acknowledge it.
Mhm.
And that's one of the choices of leadership is to take action. So what a beautiful reminder. I mean, that's what I'm hearing to our listener, to all of us, like send the text,
Mhm.
send the
Right.
note,
Mhm.
make the call, like take the action that's occurring to you and get out of your own head second
Mhm.
guessing it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's so good.
Mhm.
Deb, talk a little bit about what like what you're working on with this. If
Mhm.
we have a listener
Mhm.
that would want to connect with
Sure.
you
Mhm.
or would be interested in
Mhm.
help, like
Mhm.
and we'll put all this in the show notes. But
Great. Mhm.
what's the best
Mhm.
way to get more
Right.
help in this area?
So I did start an initiative. It's called tryingnottoDie.live. And that's the website URL. And the trying not to die part comes from the fact that when something serious happens to us, or even sometimes just all the time, right? We get so caught up in trying to not die that we forget that we really need to be living. Now, I am a marketing person. I tried for tryingnottoDie.com. It was taken. I do have it now and it reroutes. But yeah, tryingnottoDie.live is the website. Anybody can join. We do have a Facebook group. There's links there. And that's just kind of to support people. In our Facebook group, I have someone who once a week goes in and posts a very serious, clean, but a very funny joke or something that is going to make people laugh. It's always very clean, um, but just to kind of get a giggle out of us. And again, like we were saying, to remind us of that. But then again, at the urging of my business coach. I have become a cancer coach for executives because it is a different level, right? When you're diagnosed, because you're thinking, I have this going on, but I have a business I have to run, or I'm the CMO, or whatever it is. And how do I deal with that? Because the biggest thing is they think, I can't tell anyone because they're going to think I'm weak and I cannot do my job.
Uh-huh.
And so it's all about how can we help those people get through it and and come out on the other side. Some of them go, "Ugh, I don't want to be doing this anymore. My priorities changed, right?" um but it is about some very specific business type of things, like, do you have a business continuity plan? If you dropped off the face of the earth, could somebody at least finish your business, notify the clients, pay the last bills, all those various things, or could it continue without you? And what do you say to who and how? If you have employees and you're going through cancer treatment, they're going to figure it out. Right? And nature abhors a vacuum. So if you don't tell them something, they make it up. I am a corporate communication person.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen more than once, right? And it's okay to just say, I'm going through something right now. I'll keep you posted, but I need your help. And so then you can empower them to be taking on additional things and all sorts of things. And again, that's the leader, right? You're going to delegate. And then maybe when all this is said and done and things are much better, you can like take a vacation and not have your phone attached to you, all of those various things. But it is, how can you lead through a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, that's awesome. Deb,
That's
maybe this is like as we wrap up, I know my last question, Drew, maybe you have another one, is can you talk to us just like what's your from your experience, your main distinction or distinctions
Mhm,
for the difference between trying not to die
mhm.
and trying to live?
Well, it's obviously it is a mindset. And there are times where I am happy that I've got through the day, right? When people ask me how I am, I try to never ever say fine. It's okay to tell the barista at Starbucks that, right? But I tell them whatever. But one of the things I tell them is, well, I'm not looking up at 6 feet of dirt, so I'm doing pretty good. And it's a challenge, especially from a business perspective, to be making, say, long-term goals. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, like, especially 10. How am I going to do that? But how are we going to live? Are we going to show gratitude? Are we going to tell the people that we care about that we love them? All of those things, and we should be doing that no matter what.
Yeah.
Just all of those things where how can we have a more positive mindset about what's going on? And some of it is I'm not going to have toxic people in my life. I'm not going to sit all day and watch the news. All of these things, and I know especially for Drew, I mean, your faith is obviously a very big part of this. And so how can you just be grateful? Because we don't know. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And do I want people to say, oh, the last thing she said to me was mean? Or she told me she loved me.
Yeah, that's so good. I think regardless of whether or not we have
Mhm,
a crazy
mhm,
diagnosis,
mhm.
a lot of times we're living life trying not to lose or trying
Right.
not to die
Yeah.
instead of like
Mhm, mhm.
purposefully living on,
Right. Mhm,
trying to win,
mhm,
trying
mhm,
to
mhm.
thrive. And
Right.
so I think
Thrive
those are,
is I think the best word for it. Mhm.
yeah,
Well, that's great. Well, Deb, no, this has been such an awesome conversation with you today, and you can tell you're such a amazing, bubbly, happy person, and glad we can share you with our listeners. And one question we do like to ask our guests is how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as somebody who was kind. Maybe that's the easiest way to put it.
beautiful. Simple as that. It's so good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. This really has been wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing
Mhm.
your time with us and sharing your energy and light and love. It's really remarkable.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think there's just, if to our listener, if you're going through tragedy or know someone with cancer or
Mhm,
going through things, I think you can be a leader to those people and
mhm,
have such great advice just to be able to acknowledge, ask questions, not ask general questions, what can I do,
mhm,
but specific questions, and don't hesitate to reach out because
mhm.
people need you. So thank you, Deb. This was awesome.
Thank you guys.
To our listener, today's the day.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.